Tonight, BBC's apology.
Terrorists, but children. The Israeli forces are happy to kill children.
Lack of factual information or lack of honest reporting. And NATO's ongoing summit, uncertainties overshadowing promises. We cover stories about a march to commemorate the persecution of Uyghurs, chaos at a pro-Khalistan rally in Toronto, and Toronto's inclusivity campaign. Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. I'm Catherine Bullock. The BBC has issued an apology after its news host Anjana Gadgil made a remark regarding the killing of Palestinian children during an interview with former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. The interview took place during a recent military operation in the West Bank. Israeli forces invaded Jenin refugee camp last week, destroying Palestinian homes and injuring more than 100. The conflict resulted in the deaths of 12 Palestinians and one Israeli soldier. During the interview, Gadgil questioned Bennett about the killing of young people, to which he responded that all those killed were terrorists. Gadgil then said, "Terrorists, but children. Israeli forces are happy to kill children?" Her remarks instantly drew widespread condemnation from Jewish groups. The Board of Deputies of British Jews called Gadgil's remarks a breach of BBC guidelines. Media watchdog Honest Reporting filed a formal complaint calling Gadgil's conduct lacking factual basis. Following the outrage, the BBC put up a formal apology. It said that the line of questioning was legitimate, though the host used inappropriate language to ask the question. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will soon attend the ongoing NATO summit in Vilnius, Lithuania, after today's angry tirade against its NATO allies. The NATO member states are still not sure how to advance Ukraine's membership. Despite continued promises by the NATO members, Ukraine does not have any timeline as to when it will be part of the alliance. Zelensky called the reluctance of some NATO leaders to provide a clear timeline for Ukraine to join the alliance, quote, absurd. The alliance backs Ukraine in its battle against Russia's 16-month-old invasion. However, several members, notably US President Joe Biden and Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz, oppose giving Ukraine a timetable for membership. Instead, the Vilnius summit is expected to confirm more arms shipments. It will reaffirm that Ukraine's eventual place is within the alliance once the war is won. Members of a Montreal-based advocacy group gathered this past Sunday to hold a rally to raise awareness about the persecution faced by Uyghur Muslims in East Turkestan, known as Xinjiang in China. Uyghurs congregated in Montreal's Dorchester Square. The group, led by Bakhtiar Semseddine, the founder of International Support for Uyghur advocacy group, marched until the Place des Arts to commemorate the 14th anniversary of the Urumqi riots. The riots took place in Xinjiang's capital on July 5, 2009. Ethnic tensions between Mandarin-speaking Han Chinese and Uyghurs, a Muslim ethnic group, triggered the riots, resulting in about 200 deaths. Semseddine says every time he organizes events like this, he receives threats against his family in Xinjiang, but he remains resolute. Semseddine's wife shared her own mistreatment and her brother's arrests. She voiced her desire to help despite limitations. Semseddine urges the Canadian government to take further action against China, including banning products made with forced Uyghur labor. Global Affairs Canada has warned businesses about the human rights violations in Xinjiang. Semseddine continues to organize events and send newsletters to Canadian MPs. Muslims in Brockville, Ontario are making progress toward establishing their own dedicated prayer space. Ahmed Khadra, an imam and electronics store owner in the region, expressed the importance of Muslims having their own place for worship. The Muslim community currently uses a building on Park Street, which they recently purchased, for group prayers. However, the city needs to amend its zoning bylaw to officially recognize it as a place of worship. Last week, Brockville City Council's Planning and Development Committee received no objections to the plan, except for concerns about parking from a neighbouring business. Khadra mentioned that the local YMCA has offered 10 parking spots to address this issue. City Council still needs to make a final zoning decision, with Khadra hoping to secure all approvals by November. The formation of the Islamic Centre of Brockville has had its challenges, with the community initially gathering at various venues, including Khadra's store, a friend's business, and even under a building's back emergency stairs. Over the years, they received support from Wall Street United Church, which hosted them after forming a relationship through their work with Syrian refugees. The Islamic Centre of Brockville, while modest in design, holds immense significance for the Muslim community and reflects the growing diversity of Brockville. Khadra says the formation of an Islamic centre will shape the history of the city. For more on the pro-Khalistan clashes in Toronto, stay tuned. A recent pro-Khalistan rally outside the Indian consulate in Toronto ended up in clashes with a pro-India group. The news comes after a Khalistan freedom rally this Saturday aimed to seek justice for the recent killing of Sikh separatist Jathedar Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Surrey, British Columbia. Nearly 250 Khalistan supporters were present at the rally. Khalistani supporters were confronted by pro-India supporters. This led the Toronto police to intervene and erect barricades. One protester breached the barricade and was arrested. Another was arrested for allegedly assaulting a police officer. Both protesters were later released without charges. The promotional poster of the Khalistan rally has drawn criticism from Indian diplomats. The Indian Ministry of External Affairs has condemned Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for not denouncing what they call Sikh terrorism following the pro-Khalistan rally. Trudeau defended Canada's stance against violence and reiterated its commitment to counter terrorism. The Khalistan movement is a Sikh secessionist movement launched in the late 1970s. Thousands have been demonstrating at Israel's Ben Gurion Airport today against the passing of a bill that would curb the powers of the Supreme Court. The protest was part of a series of demonstrations staged by the Israeli opposition under the theme Day of Resistance against a government plan for judicial reform. Protesters were confined by police to a cordoned-off area in order to avoid hindering access to the airport. Some 84,000 passengers are scheduled to fly in and out of the airport. 66 protesters were arrested by Israeli police during the protest. The protests come as the Israeli parliament has passed a bill in its first reading. The bill limits the powers of the Supreme Court. However, in order to be fully effective, the bill requires a second and third reading. Another bill was also passed that would make it harder to remove the Prime Minister on corruption charges. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu currently faces corruption charges. Netanyahu denies the charges and rejects any link between the judicial changes and his own case. The City of Toronto has launched a new public education campaign called Toronto for All to address and raise awareness about Islamophobia in the community. Developed in collaboration with a Community Advisory Council and the National Council of Canadian Muslims, the campaign aims to promote acceptance without exceptions and confront Islamophobia in the city. It will be showcased on transit shelters, city social media channels, and the city's website. The campaign design, created through a collaborative process involving diverse community members, educators, and leaders, emphasizes the importance of respecting and celebrating the faith and cultural practices of Muslims in Toronto. The Toronto for All campaign webpage provides information and resources on Islamophobia and ways for Torontonians to combat it. This is the 13th campaign of its kind, with previous campaigns addressing various forms of discrimination and racism. The National Council of Canadian Muslims welcomed the strategy. The advocacy group emphasized the need to push back against Islamophobia and hate. Toronto is Canada's largest city and is known for its diversity and inclusive environment. It is home to Canada's largest Muslim population, with more than 400,000 Muslims living in the city. Thank you for watching. Our news is produced by Sound Vision, which is a not-for-profit organisation. We need your support for donations. Please scan the QR code on our broadcast or visit muslimnetwork.tv to donate now so we can continue to amplify the voices of Muslims in Canada and abroad.